My undergraduate thesis and my master's thesis are similar in so many ways, but they differ in some very important areas. And the biggest thing is what is expected of them. An undergraduate thesis really is about showing the world or the university, the markers that are going to tick that box to give you your degree, that you can find knowledge and that you can write it down and explain it. Really, that's what it's all about. Now, don't get me wrong, this changes from institution to institution, from field to field, but really, my undergraduate thesis was all about showing that I knew how to gather information, explain that information, and I did a little bit of application, essentially showing that I could not only take the knowledge that I found and I understood, and I could actually apply it to new things. The thing about a master's thesis, on the other hand, is that it is much more about transferring that knowledge into new areas. So it's got all of the things of a bachelor thesis. I have to do a literature review. I have to go through and sort of like explain that information and how it applies to a new field. And importantly, it's about making sure that I can actually sort of like transfer that knowledge into a research project and do some of my own things. That is the biggest difference. So they both have knowledge gathering. They both have knowledge explanation, but this one has much more knowledge transfer and application than my undergraduate thesis. Importantly, the master's thesis is something that could be taken to the PhD level. It is something that could be expanded on because there is a hint of a new question, a hint of something interesting in the world that you have just found out. It's not explored in detail, but importantly, it's in there. There's something a little bit exciting, whereas this one is just like, here's some information, here's what it means, and maybe I did that little bit of knowledge transfer, but you know, it's just sort of like me showing that I know what academia is kind of a bit like. And I guess that is expressed not only in the thickness, but also how I feel about them too. I think the master's thesis is the real moment where you get a hint of real research experience. It's that moment where you can kind of dip your toe into the unknown in a little bit of a safety bubble, of course, because it's not like a PhD where you're kind of left on your own. You have much more interaction with your with your master's supervisor, and therefore you are able to see the frustrations that come with research. You are able to see the frustrations that the academic world can kind of throw in your face because things don't go right. The politics around you isn't always sort of like rainbows and sunflowers, and you start to see the true essence of your supervisor, like who they are as a researcher rather than a teacher. And I really think that the master's kind of experience really opens up your eyes to what universities are really about. Whereas an undergraduate thesis, it's still kind of hidden from you a little bit. It's like go through this process, but you don't have much interaction with your supervisor, or at least I had less interaction with a supervisor here. Whereas my master's thesis, it was like a little taster of what a PhD could be. And I don't know why, but I probably was a little bit put off by the politics and what academia was doing with this, but I used my PhD to come to Australia, so I guess that's why I went through with it. So there's another difference. The amount of time that you have as well to do the research means that one goes into much more detail. So my undergraduate thesis, I didn't spend too much time, really going into the details of the science. It was more procedural. It was more just like doing the stuff. Whereas with a master's thesis, it was about making sure that not only could I manage like a longer term project, but I started delving deeper. So the scope and the depth of the information varies only slightly, but that slight difference really pushes you from what is expected of a bachelor's to a master's. I really feel like with my undergraduate thesis that I was just kind of repeating what other people had done a lot. You know, like I could take other people's thesis in the same area and just kind of like copy it a little bit and put it in my own words and kind of use their format and just, go through the motions. Whereas my master's thesis, I relied much more on interactions with the PhD students in the labs to write it. I asked them about what was right, what was wrong, could you read it, have I done this right? And I think it was that interaction with other people in the research group that gave me a much richer academic experience during my master's than what I got during my bachelor's, where I felt like I was, just kind of like going through the motions much more. Quick stats. Okay, we have got 45 pages versus 63 pages. Now, pages don't really mean that much, but you are expecting a slightly thicker sort of like master's thesis than bachelor's if you're in the same field. Now, they're both a little bit kind of computational chemistry based, but this one's got far more graphs, far more data, that sort of stuff in it. So the thickness does really kind of play into the role. Just if you're in the same field, if someone picks up two of these, they should be able to say, well, this one's the bachelor's and this is the thesis, just because this one's a bit heavier. 27 versus 46 references. And what that really means is that during my master's, I looked at the literature in much more detail. And it was kind of like a different field-ish. It was computational chemistry, but with this one, I was expected to really understand the latest developments in the field and how they impacted the work I was doing. With this one, it was just like anything in the past goes. Interestingly, my undergraduate thesis has no acknowledgements. It's like I just had to go through the process and I didn't want to thank anyone. This one, my master's, has a very small acknowledgement. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Rod Mason for all of his help and his guidance throughout the course of this project. You have to say that. You have to say thank you to your supervisor. He was a great supervisor, but it is always polite to put them first. I don't know why, it's just tradition. Many thanks go to my... Oh, many thanks. How formal, Stapleton. Many thanks go to my formal undergraduates, without whom these last 4 years would have been a lot less fun! Exclamation point. Without whom? I never say it. Why? I'm a normal person. I thank you for all of the great memories I have of my undergraduate years. Here's to the future. Not bad. Just not interesting, really. So, acknowledgements, no acknowledgements. But really, no one's going to read it. No one cares. That's the first time I've looked at that acknowledgement section in years. And I can say that was rubbish. Another thing that's different is the binding. Plastic versus metal. Clearly this one I cared about much more. This one I actually remember doing on my own in the office department in the Newcastle University during my year abroad. So I cared very little about this one. But this one, I wanted that nice metallic edge. And lastly, how do I feel about them? Well, to be honest with you, I was reading them and they were so long ago that I really just got bored by both of them. They were both in areas that I had no real interest in. And that's because you just go through the motions. I think even with your masters, this one I chose because I liked the supervisor, and I think that was a good choice. The supervisor seemed, in my undergraduate years, to be a really nice person, whereas with this one, I didn't get a chance to choose my supervisor because the course at the time was just like, here, you could put your preferences, but essentially it was like, oh, you're working with this person. You're like, okay, no problem. So I think I actually enjoyed my bachelor's more than this one, just because I think here the supervisor was a little bit more quirky, but he was still a lovely chap, but I didn't really connect with him like I did with my undergraduate. And I think that was a thing that I took forward to my PhD, which is your supervisor really dictates your PhD and how happy you are in research. And I think this little interaction here made me realize you have to be very, very careful. They're both really boring. They're both quite long. They're both quite technical. I mean, they satisfy everything you need to get a bachelor's or a master's. Feeling different to both of them, if I'm completely honest. Because, my PhD, I chose something that I was actually interested in. I think these, I just went through the motions, and I was more worried at the time, because I was an undergraduate and I was young, about making friends and having fun in university. And these were kind of like the outcomes that had to happen. And so they're kind of just expected. So indifferent to both. But I I don't think that's a bad thing. So there we have it. There are the main differences between a bachelor's thesis and a master's thesis. Let me know in the comments what your field or university is like, because I know it differs from university to field. I know even different research groups have expectations on what a undergraduate thesis should look like and what a master's thesis should look like. Go check out my other video where I talk about the difference between a master's and a PhD thesis. That is one of my best performing videos and I think it's really useful, so go check it out there. And also remember to sign up for my newsletter where you'll get 5 emails over about 2 weeks, everything from the tools I've used, the podcasts I've been on, how to write the perfect abstract and more. It's exclusive content available for free just for your email address, no spam ever. And so yeah, what have you got to lose? Go sign up. And secondly, go check out academiainsider.com. That's where I've got my projects, the Ultimate Academic Writing Toolkit ebook, the PhD Survival Guide ebook. I've got a blog that's growing out as well, which is to help you get the most out of academia. I've got my insider forum. It's all going off on that website. It's all for you as well. So go check it out. All right, let me know what you think in the comments and I'll see you in the next video.